Okay, so welcome
Yay.
everyone to What the Bleep is X-Men. I'm very excited about this little Zoom that we're doing. It was actually inspired by Torsten because we were having a conversation and he was talking about how people, he's a certified facilitator of access, and he was talking about how people show up that may or may not have these particular capacities, and he's not quite sure how to start the conversation, how to let them know about these X-Men tools in this body of work. So I thought it would be fun to just have a Zoom where we talk a little bit about what the bleep is X-Men.
Yeah,
So
and I think that's actually a great question to start with. Like literally, what the
what is,
bleep
I was
is an
gonna go right into
X-Men?
it. That's awesome. So, my name is Cara Wright. I probably forgot to say that at the beginning because that is something I do a lot. And I am a Access certified facilitator, and I am also an X-Men certified facilitator. And I have the amazing honor of being the creative producer for the body of work called Access X-Men. It's a specialty class that Access has, and it is something that was created by Gary Douglas. It was developed further with Gary and Dane doing classes, and then Diva Diaz has done classes over the last few years. The main classes that people sometimes are more familiar with is X-Men, Disabilities or Abilities. And it's a 2-day class that we do. There's also a lot of intro facilitators now doing intro classes into what X-Men is. And this body of work is so rich and robust in what it actually covers and what we can actually talk about and what we can actually address. And so it's one of the reasons it's one of my favorite specialties. So X-Men. So we have used the term X-Men kind of. I think Gary started using it more as a joke, I'm sure, because Gary tends to do that. Because oftentimes, especially with this topic, it's really made significant. It's made significant in this culture. It's made significant by people who have loved ones who have disorders, and it's made significant by people who have them, who've been labeled. And so, as Gary often does, he will put something that's very insignificant with something that most people make significant to try to get people to look at it a different way. So the body of work that X-Men is, we deal a lot with where people have been labeled with disabilities. And from our perspective in Access, we actually don't necessarily think that these particular things are disabilities, that they're actually things that people are coming into, coming into the world with, that are even possibly mutations of what has been before, their evolution of the species. So some of the basic labels that we talk about are, autism or ADD or ADHD or OCD or, Tourette's, or there's a lot of body things that we actually address in X-Men in the body of work. And the thing that has really started to happen more lately with these particular things is, as some of you may know, autism is actually no longer autism. Autism has like 40 different, it's the autism spectrum, and there's all these different places you can be on that spectrum, and there's all these different definitions of what those things are. And that's something that Gary has always talked about, where whenever you define something, whether it be a way someone's acting or a way someone is or a way someone communicates or how they learn or a way they are in their body, and you define it as a disability and then you give it a name and then you give it a definition even more, what that actually does is it locks that person into a particular perspective. And so much of what we do with with the X-Men work is kind of bust up those definitions and those specific labels that people get labeled with, so that you can really start to look at what actually is this. If a child is, showing up a particular way and in school is having particular, trouble doing particular things, what if that wasn't a problem, what would that actually be? And how would they be communicating that because we've decided it's this, we aren't even seeing it? So that's like a real basic, definite, like, description of Access X-Men. And as you can probably guess, depending on who shows up and what questions people ask, X-Men can go lots of different places. So how does it get better than that? And like I said, it's one of the reasons I love this work. So does
And
anyone
so,
have questions?
yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question right away, because what I was aware of, like, when we initially started this conversation, or how this conversation came about, was that there was a person that I was talking to about X-Men, and I was aware that they were an X-Men.
Yeah.
But then I was like, okay, but how do I, like, talk about it, or get them to see, or have some things that they might be aware, like, that you can use or ask or whatever, that they can see that that might be something that they are.
Yeah. Well, and even if people, I mean, you can kind of, there's lots of different ways you can go about doing that. I would say the number one way you can do it is ask, what question can you ask that would get them to start to see what it is that you're already aware of.
Awesome. That's good.
So, like, literally ask yourself, okay, so what question here could I ask this person so that they start to see that thing? The other thing that can show up is, because this body of work is all about labels, or people have been labeled, oftentimes you'll interact with people, or people will start to come to this work from a perspective of there's something wrong with them, or there's a problem. Like, I do this, and it's, you know where you talk to people and they have decided that whatever they're looking at is a problem. There's really not a lot places you can go with it. And so one of the things that I like to play with people is just to simply ask them, so if this wasn't a problem, what would it be?
Cool. Yeah.
From my experience, and I'm sure there's, but from my experience, most times somewhere in there, people know that this may not be a problem, but they haven't had anybody actually give them that space to look at it from a different perspective. And like I said, it can be so many different, it could be, parents with kids who are having issues in school, or kids that have been labeled, because oftentimes if a parent has a child that's been labeled, whether it be autism or ADD or ADHD, or even has a child that's just been acting out in school, there's so much stigma that becomes part of what that is, that just to say to them, well, have you ever actually considered, what if that's actually not your child's problem? Because often it's just, we don't have a system that actually allows people who have these capacities, allows them to show up the way that they are, allows them to communicate the way that they do. And so, I don't know if you've ever tried to communicate with someone something and they just aren't getting it, or how you're being asked to do something doesn't actually work for you. How frustrated do you get? If I was a 10-year-old kid, I probably would be acting out a lot. I'm an adult now, and I've learned to kind of probably suppress that a little bit, but I kind of, figure out ways to handle situations. But that's oftentimes why kids are, when you look at kids that have been labeled, they're also labeled not just with whatever the label is, but they're also labeled as troublemakers sometimes, or kids that are hard to have in a classroom, or, whatever it is that people kind of do. And often it's because nobody wants to not be heard, and nobody wants to know something or be trying to communicate something that no one in the room is getting. And that happens a lot. If the question you have is, am I an X-Men? Because I think sometimes people come to this work like that as well. It's like, have you ever felt like you're in a room talking and literally nobody gets what you're saying? That's sometimes a good indicator that you might be an X-Men. So anyone have questions about that?
No, I just, well, not so much questions. I'm just, it's so interesting that what you brought up with how people are labeled or just how we work with them in different environments. Because as a former high school teacher, I actually, the last few months, I've been thinking about when I was teaching. I've taught all grades, but the main grades I taught were high school. And I actually ended up having, everybody would put the badass kids in my class, or the kids that the slow learners, or like I had so many labels
Yeah.
brought into my class. And I'm just seeing, one, I'm grateful that I never actually locked them into those labels. I always seen a different possibility for them, and actually worked with them in a different way so they could see it. But one of the things, as I was thinking about these tools with Axman or Access and Xman, is going, wow, where else could I have been an invitation for, you know, a child to actually see themselves in a different way? Because a lot of these kids came, you know, they're labeled, they can get labeled right in kindergarten. And that label, unfortunately, in the system follows them in a form of a report, you know, like you get last year, the teacher, or it follows them in the like staff room. You know, I can't tell you how many times, like, and again, thankfully I had that awareness where I didn't hang out in the staff room very often. I'd rather hang out in my classroom where the kids were. And yet I'd walk in, and I often said, how come I'd walk in, I'd feel so down and then, you know, heavy, imagine that, and then walk out, felt lighter. But I would walk in and I would have all these people pronounce on me and project about that student. And it breaks my heart, actually. It just, you know, and at the same time, it excites me because there are these tools that we have that we can offer a different invitation. And so what I hear Torsten saying is, you're aware of this with this person, and it's like, how do you be that invitation that they want to know more? You know, that they want to go, hey, you know, I'd love to have, like, know that there's a different possibility than what has been, like, projected at me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and if someone's actually asking you a question, that opens the door a lot more than if they haven't even gotten to the point where they're aware that there's a different possibility in question. What I would say with you, Arlene, and probably for a lot of people who may see this, is that we all probably have had that experience where all of a sudden, like, have you been kind of the magnet for all, like, whatever you were doing, whether it be at work, whether it be as a teacher, or whether it be when you're working with kids, or even when you were just a kid yourself? Like, were you the person that all the people that other people would consider weird and different and strange actually gravitated toward you? And were you already that invitation that this body work is, right? Because you may or may not be an X-Men. You know, when you look around and everyone around you has particular capacities, and, you know, it's one of those things where it also might give you a clue as well as what you're capable of and, like, what your capacities are. Because the thing about X-Men, if you spend any time with someone who has these capacities, they change things just by their very being, and they don't actually have to even know that they're doing it. And so how much have all of us been already doing that in our lives, and how much more can we acknowledge ourselves? The more we acknowledge that, then the easier it will be. Well, probably, and I could be wrong, but probably you might find yourself in situations more often where people are going, why is this so hard? Or why, like, where they start to actually question what the norm is. Because X-Men is very not the norm. The way that we look at these things is so different than what we do in this reality. You know, there's a lot about labeling and treating things in this reality. A lot of the specific mental disorders, or, you know, or even physical disorders that we deal with in X-Men, the idea is you find the label, you figure out what it is, and then you treat it. And what we are doing is very different, because we're actually going, okay, this is how this is showing up. What the heck is it? So there's 4 questions that Gary talks a lot about, and if you've done foundation, you know them. So what is this? What can I do with it? Can I change it? And if so, how? basically energetically an X-Men is that. So if you're somebody who's always found that you turn around and why is my classroom full of all these, you know, all the kids that nobody kind of else wants? Or why do I end up on the team with the misfits, you know? What's going on? Because you might actually have that capacity. You might be an X-Men and you might just by your very being, be that question of, instead of going, what is this? So that we can decide what it is, so that we can treat what it is, you're actually going, wow, what is this? Because, you know, if you look at the disabilities, every time someone's labeled with a disability, often the label can be opposite of what's actually going on. Or B, it's, you know, it's that person's like a capacity of that person to show up. I'm just gonna mute somebody. Here we go. You can unmute yourself if you want to ask a question. That was going to set my ADD off, and I was going to get distracted by the little clicky, clicky, clicky. You know, and like Arlene said, I never actually was labeled with any specific labels, but I will tell you, I was in all the slow learner classes, and I was in all the, like I was in grade 3, but I was in grade 2 for reading, and I was in grade 2 for math, and I was always down a grade. And since growing up, and since actually learning these tools and using the tools of Access X-Men, what I have realized is I am like way beyond fast. Like it is actually the opposite. So when you do have people come to you, and if you are a facilitator, either bars or certified facilitator or body even, and they're presenting something, or they're telling you about a problem, or they're saying, I have this, really in your own space, be in the question of, okay, so like, what is this? Because often it is an opposite thing. Everything is the opposite of what it appears to be, and nothing is the opposite of what it appears to be is one of the, like a tool that comes up pretty much in every X-Men class that I've ever taken. And often it's because X-Men are so energetically aware that often they will flip energies. And then they become the chameleon of the energy. So I was really, 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 really fast. I didn't probably learn in the way that I was being asked to learn. I do remember with my times tables, my numbers didn't look proper. Like I didn't like the way I made my 4s. So I couldn't do fast times tables because I was worried about the 4 being the same every time because I have a smidge of OCD. Which is actually a capacity that as an adult, and in the last 2 years of using X-Men tools, I have started to use it massively to my advantage. So again, the breadth and depth of this work is phenomenal, and the tools can be simple, and man, they change so much, so fast. So any other questions?
Yeah, hey Kara, it's Lori. Hi. So I end up continue living on streets where there's kids that either, you know, from a diagnosis perspective, very autistic or developmentally delayed. And at Current Street, there's at least 3 kids that are nonverbal.
Mm-hmm.
And I've invited them to read Anne's book, and so that's going around the neighborhood.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's very cool, and I'm delighted they're open and curious. But I'm curious as what else is possible as far as inviting them or with those types of people and kids to.
So are you talking about like you've talked to the parents, and are the kids younger, or are you interacting with the kids?
I'm actually talking with the parents because the kids are all, you know, between like 5 and 10 or something.
Okay. So are
I'm
you
talking with the parents?
I'm
trying to energetically talk to the kids.
Yeah.
But I'm talking with the parents. Yeah.
Okay.
The one kid I'll sit down next to and just kind of be in his space.
Are you a facilitator of some type?
Just bars, yeah, and right body for you.
Awesome. Okay,
so facilitator.
First of all, everywhere you've gone to just bars. Let's uncrate.
Yes. Okay, very good.
Not
Thank
sure
you.
it's working downs. Because one of the most profound things you can do for kids that do have these, we call them disabilities, but for us, we call them, like this reality calls them, even the ones that are nonverbal, even the ones that you look at and you're like, that's definitely a disability. Even when kids show up with physical disabilities where their chromosomes are different and all of that, like this is all included. One of the biggest gifts you can give them is seeing if they will allow you to run their bars.
Okay.
So first of all, you have like the big tool totally in your disposal. And second of all, like, have you actually been communicating with them non-verbally? What if you're not actually trying to do that? What if you've actually been doing it?
Right. Yes. Yeah, I can feel that.
Yeah. So, and I wonder what you've already started to create. Because the thing that is really interesting, when you have these tools and you have this awareness, you can be aware of also where the kids are actually, because what happens is people make decisions about when we label somebody, and even parents who have kids, or someone tells them what the label is and they say your child is nonverbal autistic, and they buy that label and they don't realize how much that child is speaking to them all that time.
Right. And so in the opposite, is that because they're communicating so fast telepathically that they're they don't?
It could be so many different things. It literally could be
so many things. Okay.
Communicating different. But what I think what is interesting is that, are you non-verbally communicating with these people? And is that the reason why and then are they communicating with their parents? And the reason why they were open to the book is because of all of that occurring. And you haven't acknowledged it yet.
Right. Okay.
So what if you're doing some awesome stuff already? And what can you be or do for the parents, because the kids are younger, for the parents to ask you more questions, because really it has to come from their curiosity and their desire to know more. But Anne's book, How to Teach a Fish, I can't think of the name now. How to Teach a Fish.
Would you teach a fish to climb a tree?
Yes. Would you teach a fish to climb a tree? That's an amazing thing to give people. And then be space. Don't have a point of view if people choose it or don't choose it. And what if you just kept doing what you've been doing and acknowledge that you're actually doing it and that you're not trying to do it?
Okay.
Yeah, and see what shows up.
And then would be, if they do start asking more questions, then maybe there is something to point them to an X-Men class or something.
Absolutely. And so we have, because our specialty is now part of the hub, the new specialty hub, we have intro facilitators all over the world. You can send anybody to accessconsciousness.com/X-Men, and everybody is on there. All the classes that are being offered is on there. Everyone does sessions as well. So you can, if they're asking more questions, you can do that. You could also attend an X-Men class yourself and then get some more of the tools that you can use while you're doing bars. Like I said, they're very simple tools that you can add to your bars practice.
Great information. Thank you, Kara.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for the question.
Yeah, you bet. Okay, on you.
So any other questions? This is such an awesome conversation. It's very exciting. Anyone else? Torsten?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in because I loved what you shared when you were talking. Lots of times when we think about X-Men, we do actually go lots of time to the disability and almost like that lower harmonics of like something's wrong with the person, they're slow, like we have all these labels. And I'm just grateful for what you shared today, because I look back at my education world sort of thing, and I kind of in grade 3, I got pronounced with reading difficulty and all that, and everybody knew about it. And I don't know, I must have made some commitment, because from that forward, I was so ahead that they didn't know what to do with me. And they actually put me in classes with people that were not my kind of people. people. And so it's almost like we don't look at that, the fast part, or the potencies that, whether people can telepathically communicate in whatever ways or how they're communicating. Like, we don't see that. I mean, through Access we do, but it's just opening my awareness going, I haven't really actually have acknowledged how many X-Men capacities I have, because I was labeled so much. Even being fast, I was like, almost felt like I was being punished because I was given additional work, but no like credit or anything like that. Like, there's always this heaviness part of, like, we don't, I don't know, like when you said it's the opposite of what it appears to be, we always kind of go to they're slow, or, you know, like as if, you know, OCD is a bad thing, you know, sort of thing. There's all these amazing the opposite side of it.
So true.
I don't know. I think you get the energy of what I'm saying, but thank you. I'm grateful.
And this is why I'm so grateful for this body of work, because even I did Access for years before I found the X-Men tools, and so much had changed. And then when I found the X-Men tools, what really showed up was that I was able to identify who I am and how I be and how I do things that are different, and then not hide them, but actually look at, like, okay, so if I was being me, how would I do this, and not have a point of view about it, you know? Because like I said, with, you know, I mean, I find it funny looking back, I could not do times tables. Like, I couldn't do them. And yet I'm so incredibly fast. That should have been really, really easy for me. So that's where many of us have grown up. And, you know, oftentimes, like, for a long time, Gary always said, don't tell people they're X-Men. Like, people can't receive it. Don't tell them they're X-Men. Just talk about the kids. And I don't know what changed in the last year. I like to think it's because this particular conversation is more ready to be had by people. But, you know, Gary had a class that he did with Diva Diaz last spring, creating a different future. I don't know names today. Anyway, he started the class off with going, if you're in this class, you're all X-Men. And I was like, whoa, that's so Gary, like, you've been not saying that. You've been telling us not to say that. So something has changed. And, you know, I would say the same thing. If this Zoom that, you know, I kind of just put out there interested you, or if you do look around and you find yourself surrounded by all the different people, or if you're the person in the room who always has communicated with the person that's different because nobody else seems to get what they're getting, but you have a very easy rapport or communication, you know, you may already have some of these capacities and some of these abilities. And what would it look like if you started to go, oh, like, how do I do what I do? You know, we're all so different. And what I would love to see on the planet is that we all start to be able to be that difference. And then that's what actually starts to change things, so that we're not all trying to do things the same way. We're all looking at, like, how would I do that? If we were all going to go down the same road, from my perspective, we would all go down a different way, you know, however that is. And it's very different. It seems like it's a simple perspective, but it's a very different perspective. That's not how most of us were raised. So that's my desire. And it's one of the reasons why I wanted to have the Zoom. And I'm so grateful for you guys that came on. We're at 30 minutes. I'm happy to go a little bit longer if anyone.
I want to just make a comment about this, because so I'm like, the whole X-Men conversation in my world is fairly new. I've only been looking at it for like half a year or so. And what's been interesting is the conversations that I've actually had with you about X-Men, about capacities, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And I've even talked to people, you know, that are in Access and so on. And I'm like, well, if you want to know what an X-Men's really like, just look at Kara. He literally shows up like an X-Men, like she just is that. And it's like, what it's interesting when we're doing this Zoom, I'm like, not only are you speaking the way you speak and you show up the way you show up, but you are literally being that energy. It's like you are tapping in with everyone, you're connecting with everyone, you're aware of everyone. Like, it's all that's all part of X-Men that you're actually being on this call.
Very cool.
And so it's like, and the cool thing is that, like, if anyone here on this call is aware of that, guess what you are? Like,
I was gonna say, because if you can follow me at all, if you can like glean 10 minutes of this 30-minute conversation, you might be an X-Men.
We're in trouble then.
Oftentimes, like out in the real world, when I show up as this, which truly the X-Men tools have given me the gift of showing up as me more and more every day. And there's so much more I can choose. And I'm excited for that. And when I go out into the real world and I interact with people, the looks are general confusion. Just that's always, people are just generally confused by me. So that's another sign that you might be an X-Men, is if you speak and people go, what? Like they just don't get it. And what if that's not wrong?
Or you might be an X-Men if you can communicate with another X-Men.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Like, if you get any of this, you might be an X-Men. So again, I thank all of you so much for coming on, and I definitely think I'm going to be doing more of these. So if you want to come back on and play, if this opens up curiosity in your world. There's also, like I said, Diva Diaz is doing classes around the world, the 2-day classes. I'm also going to be doing some classes in the US and in Canada in the next year. And there's intro facilitators doing telecalls and intro classes everywhere. So Access Consciousness /X-Men. And you can check that out. Feel free to also email. You can email me at carwright@accessconsciousness.com, or you can email xmen@accessconsciousness.com if you have questions. If you would love for me to find someone to do, if you want a facilitator to talk to, whatever you desire, whatever I can do to get these tools out there and to get people to know them, I am all for it. So again, thank you so much, and we will see you soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cara. Thanks, everyone.